Sir, we are debating.
Order.
Sir, we are debating today a motion that is born of malice and should be disregarded by this Parliament. You can tell the nature of the malice, if for no other reason than when putting forward a proposition, despite the fact that members of the government find it utterly offensive. We listened in silence, and yet barely a member on that side of the chamber can restrain themselves from gleefully digging in, interjecting, shouting, indeed. It's a sign of the thuggery and the bullying behaviour that led to the introduction of the...
Order, Minister. There is a point of order. Please be seated. Member for West Torrens.
Quite helpfully, sir, the word thug is unparliamentary, and I ask the member to withdraw and apologise.
Did I address it? The thuggery of the behaviour of the opposition, sir, was not addressed to an individual. And I submit that the House has never required an apology.
The Minister, I understand, is making submissions in relation to the point of order. I understand that the member for West Torrens is raising a point of order and has taken offence. I understand that's raised on the basis that the matter, or rather the proposition that a member is a thug was directed to him. It's a subjective standard, Minister. I'll give you an opportunity to withdraw and apologise.
Sir, I did not address the word thuggery in relation to one individual, sir.
Well, you may not have, Minister, but as I understand it, the member has, on a subjective basis, taken it as addressed to him.
So do I understand your submission that the member, having assumed that the word thuggery must only have applied to him, that the House is to hold that a member cannot refer to a range of people that may or may not include a member, but that member thinking that maybe their behaviour draws that assertion, Minister, it requires an apology?
Minister, there is a point of order to the point of order. The member for Lee.
This is not a matter that's open to debate by the member for Morialty. You've ruled. He either follows the ruling or you name him, sir.
Giving him an opportunity. In fact, there's another point of order.
Point of order on the point of order. You did not rule. You invited the member to do something.
That's quite right.
But my point of order, sir, is that there is very, very significant precedent in this House that when a remark is directed specifically to a member in isolation, that member may take offence. When a remark is directed to a group of members or the opposition or the government as a whole, then that requested point of order does not apply.
Very well. Members, we are confining ourselves for the moment to minutiae in the standing orders. These matters are significant. However, I've listened carefully to the submission from the Minister. The Minister indicates that he hasn't named an individual member. I've given him the opportunity to withdraw. I haven't ruled in relation to that matter. I continue to give the member that opportunity. He's indicated to the House that he's not referring to an individual member. I think we can resolve the matter on that basis. Minister.
Thank you, sir. The fact is that this motion that we have before us today is the final step in what I believe to have been a planned sequence of events put forward by members of the opposition in its first account.
Order. Minister has the call.
The assertion, sir, by the member for Mawson is offensive. I don't take personal offence because I'm absolutely certain that I didn't. I'm also certain that no one on the government benches also submitted to that.
It hasn't been raised, and in fact I didn't hear it.
I'm reflecting, sir, on the behaviour of those opposite, which has been consistent throughout this debate. Those members, indeed, who argued that there should be a committee in the first place had, in my strong view, and on which there is substantial evidence, prejudged the matter. They had predetermined a position. They said that the outcome, of course, would be consistent with their view. In putting their proposition to members of the crossbench, I would submit that every single member of the crossbench who received that submission, whoever it came from, would know in their hearts, would know in their minds that such a view had been predetermined, prejudged, and that no matter who the Labor Party put forward to be on the committee, then their findings, their views and their arguments would be beyond a doubt from the beginning of the very inquiry. And it is in that view, I think, sir, that many people in the community, many people familiar with the material, have little regard for the findings of this committee. And the committee, I would submit, sir, did itself no credit in relying on an approach that the member for Hyson described as a counsel for the prosecution, which I think has no basis in the Westminster tradition. It does have a basis in the American political tradition and the appointment of special prosecutors. The special prosecutor to accumulate evidence for a political end and a political purpose. And this committee, by providing the framework within which such a special prosecutor could do their work, could find out whatever they could to make a case against the member for Bragg, did itself no credit. It brought to this House a new approach, a novel approach, a bad approach, an approach, I would submit, sir, that is very familiar in America, where all of the time, whenever you have a president and a Congress of different houses, you always have one looking to find a special prosecutor to find out information that could be argued against the other. It's the Rudy Giuliani approach, sir, and it did the committee no credit. It does the House little credit, of course, that it went along, but it is understandable that the House went along with the views of a committee, because traditionally that is indeed what Houses have done. But it does not follow, sir, that because the committee has submitted for the House's consideration recommendations in relation to punishments, that the House, even if members of the House, even if a majority of the House, a slim majority of the House, had come to the conclusion that it would support the no-confidence motion, which of course was the third step on the predetermined case, the putting of the case of privilege, the holding of the committee, and then the no-confidence motion, and this is the fourth step. Even if members supported that third step, there is no requirement to support the fourth step. Indeed, the member for Enfield this morning, despite being the chair of the committee, whose reputation she has been so quick to jump up and defend despite its Giuliani-esque special prosecutor approach, despite that, she has disregarded the recommendations of the committee. The chair of the committee and the members of the opposition can't hold themselves in, sir. They must continue shouting.
Order.
That is the behaviour they bring to this House every day. The chair of the committee,
Order, member for Mawson.
The member for Mawson, sir, cannot restrain himself. The chair of the committee, despite having relied upon the Giuliani-esque special prosecutor to come up with a series of recommendations which she put to the House, that she argued be put forward and debated as a matter of priority, then this morning stood up and walked away from them. Walked away from 3 of the recommendations, deleting 2 and taking one further one away. I bring to the House's attention some of the debate that has further gone on in relation to the recommendations from this committee that had prejudged the outcomes of what it would find, that had already set in place the punishments that it was going to argue, and I would continue to argue, sir, whose findings should not be taken with the same degree of sincerity by this House as we have traditionally done so. We, sir, have absolutely to consider the merits of the case in relation to the arguments for the punishments. Now, 3 of the punishments that remain, the items in F and H and I, all relate to matters of conflict of interest, ministerial code of conduct, and indeed the breach of the code of conduct be of sufficient severity to amount to contempt. Sir, these are matters that are being considered by the Ombudsman. The member for West Torrens, not half an hour ago, argued that no one in this House should say anything that would get in the way of the Ombudsman's inquiry. For the House to take a position on these 3 items would be in direct contravention of the member for West Torrens' argument, would, I agree, be utterly inappropriate for this House to intervene in those matters being investigated by the Ombudsman, and the member for West Torrens to argue that nobody should be talking about anything that might influence the Ombudsman while arguing in favour of a motion that determines an outcome of what the Ombudsman is investigating is extraordinarily odd, or maybe incompetent. The fact is that the members of the opposition who hang on the member for West Torrens' every word and do whatever he says for whatever reason they do should think on the fact that his very argument should preclude them from voting for the motion, because F, H and I are in direct contravention of what he is arguing. argued, which leaves us with the first three matters, the alleged misleading of this House. Now, it is open, of course, to members of the House to have noted, as we did in the last sitting week, the report, and indeed to have voted on a vote of no confidence if they felt that the mere fact that the member for Bragg's decision had been referred to the Ombudsman, that may well have given a member or members of the crossbench, for example, reason to vote for the no confidence motion. But it does not necessarily follow that they agreed with every aspect of those recommendations in the report. It does not follow that they agreed necessarily that the Attorney-General, as she then was the member for Bragg, misled the House. It does not follow, sir. And sir, I would submit that if a member felt that there may have been a conflict, and I do not believe there was, then it only lies for them to be convinced that she not only misled the House, if she did, but she intentionally did so. And, sir, it has been not even argued against by those opposite. Some of the points put forward by Francis Nelson in the committee debate, it was not challenged, the submission put forward in relation to whether or not, or when indeed, the member for Bragg found out that KIPT had involvement with the timber across the road. The member for Enfield described it before as the plantation forest opposite Gum Valley contracted to KIPT. Now, and it is clear to me, sir, that for the charge to stick, the member for Bragg would have had to have known the contractual arrangements related to KIPT. But the member for Bragg was not in the favourable position that some other members were to be on such close terms with senior officers within KIPT or indeed the people that they employ or contract. That is not necessarily known, and indeed the case has never been put. It has certainly been never satisfactorily put that the member for Bragg said anything that she did not know to be true. Indeed, she has made it very clear that that has long been a private forest. And the fact that it had been contracted for logging or clearance or whatever the situation is by KIPT, not having been established that she knew that, indeed she knew that it would be logged at some point by somebody. And that also goes to the conflict, the fact that there was always going to be logging there. But the opposition in their committee and in this House have never satisfactorily established that the member for Bragg was familiar with those contractual arrangements at any point that is relevant to the matter. The second basis, the second pillar of the member for Enfield's prosecution based on Dr Gray's recommendations was this close personal friendship, this close family friendship with the Mayor of Kangaroo Island. Now, I know Michael Pengilly. Many members in the House know Michael Pengilly. The member for Bragg's known Michael Pengilly for a long time. It does not necessarily follow that because we are former colleagues on friendly terms that it would amount to a conflict in any way. I established in the House last sitting week, the member for Bragg hasn't even supported Michael Pengilly's every political attempt. The member for Bragg and Michael Pengilly are of different ages, as the committee heard. They went to different schools. The member for Bragg was at Pandana Area School to year 11. The member, Michael Pengilly, was not. The fact is that there is not the evidence to establish a close personal friendship or relationship or financial relationship of any sort between the member for Bragg and Michael Pengilly that would sustain a conflict of interest or misleading of the House in any way. Indeed, if anyone looks at the contributions by the member for Enfield today or indeed 2 weeks ago, they can go through that. And so much of this hangs on the idea that the member for Bragg and Michael Pengilly are somehow intertwined in their relationship. They are not. Certainly no more than many other landholders on the island or members of parliament with interests on the island or members of parliament with friendships with people who work for KIPT. There are a range of people who own land on Kangaroo Island or indeed have interests in this matter who have much closer relationships with key players than the member for Bragg does with Michael Pengilly. And it would be completely unjust for this House to impose a penalty based on the idea that the member for Bragg knew about contractual arrangements between a forest across the road that had always been a private forest, or at least for as long as I'm aware of, and indeed was always going to be logged at some point, and a company that now had a contractual arrangement that the member for Bragg wasn't aware on, as one pillar, and as a second pillar, the idea that Michael Pengilly and the member for Bragg have a closer personal relationship than any other number of people involved in this case. Sir, what we are debating this morning could amount to a serious injustice should the House vote for this motion. The fact is that to establish misleading the House, it is not enough to establish and put a sentence of a 2-day suspension on a member for getting a fact wrong. If indeed that happened, you must also demonstrate intent, and that has not happened. And secondly, sir, to establish a contempt of this House based on matters that are currently being considered by the Ombudsman would, as the member for West Torrens said, amount to, or as the member for West Torrens described, he didn't realise he was saying it, it would amount to this House forming a view and making a case for something that is currently under the Ombudsman's consideration. It is utterly inappropriate. Now, I tell you, sir, this House has a significant choice ahead of it. It has not heard evidence to establish a firm case against the Attorney-General for conflict, nor of former Attorney-General, nor of a misleading of the House, and I urge all members to oppose this motion. It remains, as was the last one, a nasty, personal, political, vindictive motion that all members should oppose.